evening. My name is Mary Claire Hanna. I'm the president of the Navajo County Bar Association, which is presenting this candidate forum, along with City 4 Television, to help you, voters, choose among our candidates for the upcoming primary election on August 26. To my left is Carolyn Sellers, our timekeeper. Welcome to those in the audience, to our candidates, and to those viewing by television. Tonight we are hearing from 4 candidates who are running for contested primaries in 3 precincts for the office of Justice of the Peace. A Justice of the Peace hears civil cases that involve claims of $10,000 or less, not counting interest, costs, or attorney fees. They also hear civil and criminal traffic cases, small claims cases, evictions, and misdemeanor domestic violence cases. Navajo County is divided into 6 precincts. Tonight you will hear from candidates for 3 of those precincts. The other 3 do not have contested primary elections. In other words, a candidate is running without opposition in his own party. Now he or she may have opposition from another party and will sponsor another forum in October for those contested final elections. Allow me to introduce tonight's candidates. Precinct 1 is the Holbrook area. We have 2 Democratic candidates, Evelyn Mares, the current judge, and her challenger, Robert Salabai. Precinct 2 is the Winslow area. There are 2 Democratic candidates, Ray Rardin, who is with us tonight, and B.J. Little, who is not participating tonight. Precinct 4 is the Kayenta area. There are 2 Democratic candidates, Susie Nelson, the current judge who is seated with us tonight, and her challenger, Delphina Klitzo-Francis, who is not participating tonight. Each candidate will give an opening statement, up to 3 minutes long, to introduce him or herself. The order has been predetermined by drawing lots. After the opening statements, I will ask questions. Each candidate will have up to 1 minute to answer. After all the questions are answered, each candidate will give a brief closing statement, no longer than a minute. Our goal is to help you get a feel for each candidate. Our first opening statement will be from Robert Salabai in the Holbrook election.
Thank you. Voters out there in Arizona, Precinct 1 consists of Woodward, Holbrook, Indian Wells, Greasewood, and White Cone and Jadito communities. And I'd like to state that I am a veteran with the U.S. Army, discharged honorably, and been practicing my employment and unique skill as an interpreter of the Navajo tribe, district courts, state courts, and federal court as an official interpreter certified. And I've been admitted to practice before the Navajo Nation courts as an advocate. And I've been involved with the Navajo Nation government as a council delegate, as a legislative advisor to Judiciary Committee, and also an employee of the Navajo tribe for 18 years and have retired from the tribal government. With that said, I think I have some unique qualification to administer justice.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Ray Rardin, a candidate for the Winslow precinct.
Yes, I'm Mr. Rardin. I'm running for Precinct 2, and this includes Winslow, Dealcon, Teasdale, Bird Springs, and most of the Hopi tribal lands. I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney for 8 years. I first started out as a defense attorney, and I've been a prosecutor in Navajo County for the last 7 years. The last 4.5, I worked with Judge Mares and Judge Kolomitz as the felony charging attorney. Over those 4.5 years, I could see problems with the system. especially counseling. We would get a lot of people that would come in and go out. It was like a rotating door. And this is part of the reason that I'm running, is that I think that my experience, I can help solve some of these problems. People would come in and just leave and come back and just leave again. When you're in court and you hear individuals, they were pretty candid to the court, like Judge Maris and Judge Colomitz. And by sitting in there, I could hear what was going on. And a lot of the counseling wasn't very productive. And so some of the things I want to do is to try to get more of the churches or non-government agencies involved. I want the counseling to be effective counseling. And if that means that you're LDS and you can go to your bishop, that means that if you're Catholic and you go to your priest, or you want to do more traditional ways like a sweat lodge or to go to a medicine man, that's what I want to do. I want more effective counseling so people don't come back. My job will be as the justice of the peace is how can I put someone in a position where they won't come back to me and they can be better fathers, mothers, daughters, and sons. When I went out and I started campaigning, I went and started talking to people in the community to find out what their biggest concerns were. And at least in Winslow, the biggest concerns is that they wanted a justice of the peace that was fair and impartial, that they wouldn't show favoritism to individuals that had been in the community for a long period of time or they had money or influence. They were also concerned about individuals that were homeless and on the street, especially for vandalism, and individuals that would urinate and cause the disruption. When I went up to the Hopi Nation, or tribal lands in the Navajo Nation, the biggest concerns that I heard were bootlegging. There were a lot of elders that were worried about that, especially there was a lady in Tisto, an elder that was shaking visibly because she's worried about her people up on the Navajo Nation. The same thing happened a couple of weeks ago. Went up to the Hopi tribal lands. An elder came to me during lunch, and she's worried about small children selling alcohol. The other thing too is they're worried about more traditional methods to treat people, and I'm for that. If someone comes to my court and they belong to the Navajo Nation or the Hopi tribal lands, as a form of probation, I believe that traditional methods might help them not come back. And the other thing too is that I appreciate veterans. And I'll try to make certain that the court helps veterans in any way possible to get over any addictions they might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final opening statement, our next opening statement is Susie Nelson from the Kayenta area.
Good evening. My name is Susie Nelson. I'm the Justice of the Peace in Kayenta Justice Court Precinct 4. And my precinct covers Kayenta, Shanto, Chilchimito, Forest Lake, Black Mesa, Pinon, Hard Rock, Whippoorwill, Lomel, Blue Gap, Tachi, and parts of Old Jato. I've been a Justice of the Peace for 7 years, and I've been with Navajo County for 15 years. We are located on the Navajo Reservation in Kayenta, and there are two courts there, the Navajo Nation courts and the Kayenta Justice of the Peace. The non-Indians passing through our jurisdiction come to our court. We do a lot of weddings. I get asked to go to do a lot of traditional weddings, and then we do a lot of weddings in Monument Valley, and some we've done on hot air balloons. That was fun. And we have several Navajo County offices at our complex. Mr. Jonathan Nez, our supervisor, has an office there. Navajo County Sheriff Casey Clark has an office there. Navajo County Elections, Navajo County Health Department come there to do birth certificates and register people. And I started with the Kayenta Justice Court in 1999 when the former and the late Judge Evelyn Bradley was the Justice of the Peace there. Prior to that, I was employed with the Navajo Nation courts for 8 years. And when Judge Bradley got elected, she asked me to be her clerk, and I started working for her as her clerk. And Judge Bradley was going on her 3rd term in 2007 when she got ill and she had to resign, and she recommended that I be appointed in her position, and I've been in her position since then. I am familiar with the job as a clerk. I know the daily process of the court, daily operation of the court, and the voters out there for Navajo, the counties, the Navajo County and the precincts that I named. I would appreciate your vote, and I would like to introduce myself in Navajo. Sheya Susie Nelson Hunche, Ashi Hinshlo, Tlazatlom Bashichin, Twenty national ado look at the nedashiche what I sanench ado ahe. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. And finally, Evelyn Juarez, also from the Holbrook area.
Good evening, everyone. First, I'd like to thank Mary Claire Hanna and the Navajo County Bar Association for sponsoring this event. It's been 4 years since I've been here. I can't believe that it's gone by so fast. First, a little history about myself. I was born in Holbrook to the late Lorenzo and Vivian Garcia and am the youngest of 7 siblings. I've been married to my wonderful husband, Manny, for 35 years. We raised 2 daughters, Rihanna and Leah, in the Holbrook schools, the same schools where we attended. I am proud to have served as the Justice of the Peace for Precinct 1 since 2011. You entrusted me with ensuring that justice is well served and that everyone is treated fairly and respectfully. I take this very seriously, and I think I have proven worthy of that trust. I bring with me to the bench 34 years prior experience in the judiciary and community involvement. Community involvement is very important to me, so I'm always happy to speak at events to youth and the citizens of our precinct. Now, I'd like to share with you some of my accomplishments during my term. I am honored to have been elected as presiding judge of the Navajo County Justice of the Peace after just 3 years on the bench. This honor was given to me by my co-judges of Navajo County Justice of the Peace. As presiding judge, some of my responsibilities are to exercise administrative supervision over the justices of the peace, pro tem judges, and hearing officers, perform administrative duties as delegated by the presiding judge of the Superior Court, represent the justice courts on issues before the Board of Supervisors, the Supreme Court, and the legislature. Second, the Arizona Supreme Court Chief Justice appointed me to serve on the Arizona Commission on Victims in the Courts, and I'm currently serving my 2nd term. I work diligently to represent the Navajo County judges in this position and ensure that victims receive their legal rights according to the law. Next, one of my creative ways to impart justice. A young man came into my courtroom charged with underage consumption of alcohol. I ordered him to complete community service in my office instead of giving him a fine. He came into my office every day until his community service was completed. By the time the day came that he was done, my staff had come to rely on him. To this date, I have found a way and a grant to keep him
Excuse
on
me?
and
Excuse me?
make sure that his position is permanent. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our opening statements. We will now begin our questions and answers. I will ask a question. Some of them are rather long. Each candidate may ask for the question to be repeated without any time penalty. Our first question will be answered by Ray Reardon and then each of the candidates. The following scenario is based on the recollections of a former local justice of the peace. This case was his very first experience as a judge sentencing someone who had just pled guilty in his court. It is quite common for a defendant to plead guilty right away and to be sentenced right then. Typically, the only information available to the judge is the name of the defendant, the date of the offense, and the charge. Many defendants give out only a tiny bit of information, and by and large, most don't have a lawyer to help them through the process in these types of cases. In this case, a young woman who looked to be about 19 or 20 years old pled guilty to shoplifting. The judge asked her, "What did you do to be guilty of shoplifting?" She said that she took some over-the-counter medicine without paying for it. For many judges, the next step would be to impose sentence, without asking anything further, and that would be legally permissible. The factual basis was established. The defendant is always given an opportunity to speak and add things, but many of them are frightened or not comfortable speaking for themselves. Even though she appeared shy and embarrassed, the judge persisted. He learned that she had married in the past year and they had a new baby at home who was sick. She'd gone to the store and paid for some milk. She just didn't have enough money to buy the medication that she felt would help her baby. It was over $10. She was caught before she left the store, so the merchandise was returned to the merchant, put back on the shelf for sale. Please tell us what your sentence might be in this case. Traditionally, judges can fine, give community service, or order counseling, or craft something more creative. After each candidate has responded, I'll tell you the actual sentence that the judge felt was appropriate. Please.
All right, can I ask you a question? So she pled to the court
Yes,
without having a defense attorney there.
correct.
And the scenario was that she didn't have money and she was stealing the medicine because she was using the money for something else that was important.
That's in the scenario.
All right, so when does my 1 minute begin? When I start answering the question?
Yes.
I'm the only one up here that's ever actually given a plea. I'm the only one who's ever told their client to take a plea. And here's what I would do. The judge doesn't have to take the plea agreement. They can reset the case and then advise them to come back so they can have a defense attorney if it so requires. In this case, they wouldn't get a defense attorney. But if you reset the case, they would have a prosecutor. And I can tell you right now, as a prosecutor, if the facts came to me because there's a necessity defense, this is the kind of case that I would give someone a deferred prosecution on. They weren't stealing it because they didn't have the money. They were taking the goods because they had something else to do that was important. And if I remember correctly, it was they had to feed their child. And so what I'd do is I'd reset it, have them go talk to the prosecutor, and hopefully they would get a deferred prosecution on it, if not just a dismissal straight out with restitution paid. But there should be no restitution because the items were sent back.
Thank you. Same question to Susie Nelson. Would you like for me to repeat it?
No, I think I got it. As a mother, I can understand what she was going through, not having the money, and then I would probably defer the case and ask her to come back at a later time. Probably wouldn't put her on probation. She returned the goods, and I would have her go to counseling for both her and her husband, and that's what I would do. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Same question to Evelyn Mares.
Okay, well, the first thing I would do is try to find a little bit more information from the defendant. Ask her if there were any resources that she was able to seek, such as the WIC program and things like that, that may be able to help her. I would also ask her if she graduated from high school and whether or not she was able to work. Then after determining, those issues, I would then probably, I would sentence her right away. I believe that sentencing should be done as soon as possible, and probably, given her community service, ordered her to retrieve her high school diploma and seek other resources.
Thank you. And finally, to Robert Salabai, same question.
Well, with the information given, the 19-year-old girl was pleading guilty before the courts without very much information, except that she admitted that she took the products and it was returned. But I think what is very important and missing out of this information is if she was given any Miranda rights as to her arrests. And none of that being given, I would dismiss the case.
Okay, thank you. You've all answered, so I'll tell you the rest of the story, what that judge did. The judge ordered the young mother to research what local agencies could have helped her buy medicine for her sick baby. She was ordered to go in and speak with at least 3 of those agencies. She then had to return to court and report to the judge what she had learned. In my opinion, this is an example of judicial creativity that could help prevent future incidents by educating her and connecting her with services that the young family clearly needed. Our next question will be first directed to Susie Nelson. The very essence of being a judge is to be fair and neutral. A judge needs to be able to make decisions free of outside considerations or outside pressure. The judge is expected to just consider the law and the facts in front of him or her and make the best decision possible. Please listen carefully to the following hypothetical situation. You're the Justice Court judge. One day, a local power broker stops by just to say hello. You know him casually, but not well. He tells you that he's been pleased with how you've done so far, and he and his friends think you have a bright future beyond your current position. He urges you to keep up the good work. As he is leaving, he casually mentions that you're hearing a case later that day. He says it's the one with the big corporation who's suing that local guy, his really good friend. He says he's confident that you'll do the right thing. After all, that big corporation is really hurting his friend and other local businessmen. He winks as he says, "Doesn't that big corporation realize that we have the home court advantage?" And then he leaves. What do you do? How do you respond to this situation?
We are taught to be fair and impartial, and I wouldn't listen to what he told me, and I would just make a decision based on the facts that are presented to me. And I don't remember the terms right now, but that's what I would do. I just make a decision based on the facts.
Alrighty, thank you. Same question to Evelyn Mares.
Okay, well, first, the position that I am in is the position that I want. So I'm not seeking anything further. I'm happy, very happy where I am. Second, this does happen. It has happened to me in the past. So I have a standard answer that I tell everyone that appears to be asking for a favor. And this is what I tell them. I treat everyone the same, and I treat everyone fairly and with respect. So I hope that you understand that when you come into my courtroom to see me.
Thank you. Robert Salabai, same question.
With the information given about this matter that is coming before the courts that I'd be sitting on, I would remind a person that the court is impartial and that any information, privileged information provided to the court could disqualify the judge from hearing the case, and the judge should thus disqualify himself or recuse himself from hearing the case.
Alrighty, thank you. And finally, Ray Rardin, same question.
This is fairly easy. I would be fair and impartial and treat everyone with respect, whether you're from Winslow, the Navajo Nation, or you're on one of the Hopi tribal lands. To me, I'd rather lose my position and keep my integrity, or not even win at all. And so if someone put me in that position, they wouldn't get any unfair treatment. And that's just the way it's going to be. That's the way I am as a prosecutor. That's why I left my job over at the public defender's office, because my boss told me I had to take less cases to trial, and I couldn't work with that. And so, at least to me, the only thing that I have that I can take with me is my integrity. And if anyone tried to buy that jurisdiction, the people's jurisdiction, it wouldn't go very far. And like I said, my integrity goes with me. This job doesn't. And so therefore that I'd make sure that everyone's treated fair and impartially.
Thank you. Our next question goes first to Evelyn Mares. Why should a voter choose you instead of your opponent? If the public feels that you are both qualified, how should they pick between you? Please try to avoid repeating what you just said in your opening statement.
Okay. Well, I have a lot of experience. I worked for Navajo County for 30 years in various capacities. So I worked in the clerk of the court's office, in Superior Court, as a JA. The last 10 years, I was the director of victim services for the Navajo County Attorney's Office, so I bring that to the board. I've also worked as a justice of the peace for almost 4 years now, and all of the people that I run into, anybody I come in contact with, reminds me what a great job I'm doing. And because of my accomplishments, I really feel like I bring what Precinct 1 needs to the bench.
Thank you. Same question, Robert Salabai.
Can you just restate
Repeat
your
it.
question again?
I'm just going to repeat it verbatim. Why should a voter choose you instead of your opponent? If the public feels you are both qualified, how should they pick between you? Please try to avoid repeating what you just said in your opening statement.
They would choose between the two of us the better uniquely qualified person that can communicate with the community at large. Over 80% of the population is Navajo. And speaking to them more effectively in Navajo would bring them more aware of the law. And my ability to translate from Navajo to English and English to Navajo from the bench to those coming before the courts, I think would benefit those clienteles more effectively and thus reduce the recidivism of return of those defendants to the court time and time again.
Thank you. Ray Rardon, same question.
I'm uniquely qualified in a certain sense that I've been both a prosecutor and a defense attorney, so I know what it's like to be on both sides. And so if you elect me, you're going to get sounder decisions. You're going to get someone who knows the law that will be able to read defense attorneys and prosecutors' motions. The other thing, too, is I care about the community. That's why I moved to Winslow. I worked there for 4.5 years, and I fell in love with the Winslow and the surrounding area. And I want to make certain that we can progress and move further than where we are now. I used to be a scientist before, and I was a social scientist. So I know how to take the data that comes to me and fix problems. That's why I went up to the Hopi tribal lands. That's why I go up to the Navajo Nation, is I'm trying to learn as much about the culture and about what's going on between Winslow and the Hopi tribal lands and the Navajo Nation to try to figure out ways to solve the problems between the two jurisdictions.
Right, thank you. Same question to Susie Nelson.
Thank you. I believe I have the experience, and I'm respected by the community, and people come to the court to inquire. I travel out to all the chapters in our area and explain the procedures in our court. And what makes us unique is that we're on the reservation, and most of our clientele is non-Indian passing through. And we have the Navajo Nation courts there, and a lot of our people, they get in trouble off the reservation, and they always ask for guidance, and we give them procedures as to procedures in the state courts. And that term that I was alluding to in the last statement was appearance of impropriety, if I may. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you. Our next question is going to go first to Robert Salabai. One day, you're doing your civil traffic cases, things like speeding. One of your cases involves a man who's about 56 years old. His wife was a passenger in the car, and she is there too with him in court. He is contesting his speeding ticket, and the police officer is present to defend the ticket. The man is quite adamant that he was going the speed limit and not over. He tells you that it's a point of pride that he always obeys every traffic law. He has no tickets of any kind, not even a parking ticket in his past. His wife tells you that he wasn't speeding, that the other cars were passing them, and that her husband never, ever speeds, even when they may be late. Years ago, a dear friend died in a fatal traffic accident from speeding, and it influenced her husband greatly, even though he wasn't even present there for the accident. They both tell you that there were lots of other cars on the road, and on that day, and in their opinion, the officer simply pulled over the wrong car. The police officer tells you that he pointed his radar gun at their car. He is firm that he did not make a mistake. He tells you they were going 11 miles per hour over the speed limit and that he issued a proper citation. The officer appears a little irritated that his word is being questioned, and the driver and his wife aren't happy either. There's no other information presented to you for you to consider. What do you do?
This being a speeding ticket by a police officer, and it was tracked by radar and documented by that instrument. Yet the defendant claims that they were abiding by the speed limits, and thus the wife also supports. I believe that I would tend to believe the police officer was doing his job and monitoring and enforcing the law. And I would favor his position and sentence the couple, or the defendant, the driver.
Righty. Thank you. Ray Rardin, same question.
Okay, for a civil case, it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. Working with the officers, I can tell you right now, they need to calibrate the radar. If the officer was in front of me and I asked him if he calibrated, he said no, then the gentleman's ticket would be dismissed. I would ask for a video because DPS is required to have videos in the vehicle. If there's no video, I would dismiss the case. In other words, it's up to the state to prove these things. It's not up for the person, to me. And so therefore, if the officers did a crappy job, if they didn't calibrate the radar, they didn't take videos, they couldn't prove to me there was no other car in the vicinity when they said they tracked that vehicle, the 56-year-old gentleman's ticket's going to be dismissed. That's easy.
Thank you. Susie Nelson, same question.
We have many traffic civil cases that come before us. A lot of defendants contest their citations, and of course we have to listen to the facts and make our decisions based on what is presented to us in court. And I would, based on the officer's testimony, I would find the defendant responsible. Thank you.
Thank you. Evelyn Morris.
All right, well, first, for civil traffic cases, it's more likely than not, and that's the element that you have to find. There are also four other elements that the officer would have to prove: date, time, jurisdiction, and identity. Had those been proved, then I would go, as Ray said, to the radar to make sure that it had been calibrated. The question that I have, and I don't think this is as easy a question as it appears, and I've had these in court before. The question that I have is that sometimes the radar is affected by other cars. So I would delve in, and the judge can ask additional questions. And so I would have to ask some additional questions about how many cars were there, and then the calibration to determine whether or not the driver in fact was speeding. Then the other thing is that the 11 miles over, it's kind of hard to make a mistake with 11 miles over, but this is not that easy of a question to determine. There's some things you really need to look into.
Thank you. This next question will go first to Ray Rarden. One popular definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Our criminal justice system is severely overburdened and is requiring more and more of our budgets every single year. Please comment on our criminal justice system and specifically your part in it as a tax-paying citizen who pays for our government's choices. Should we continue with business as usual, or do you have a vision for something else? Please elaborate.
So you want me to answer this question not as an attorney or someone running for the justice of the peace, but as a taxpayer?
Would you like for me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
All right.
Repeat the por favor.
One definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Our criminal justice system is severely overburdened and is requiring more and more of our budgets every year. Please comment on our criminal justice system and specifically your part in it as a tax-paying citizen who pays for our government's choices. Should we continue with business as usual, or do you have a vision for something else? Please elaborate.
All right. And I'm going to answer this question. You and I have had this discussion before, and I think we're building too many jails and there's too many people in prisons, and that we need to do a better job at getting people treatment early on that have addictions. And so that's the easy question there, or the easy answer. The thing is, I've done as a prosecutor the last few years is I've taken cases personally up to Superior Court and talked to the family members to find out how I could best help a defendant. And I think this is probably one of the strongest aspects of what I've done in the last 4.5. I ask family members what their family member needs, and I take their considerations when I give a plea. In other words, I give a plea focused specifically for that defendant to try to get them treatment so they don't come back. And as a justice of the peace, I would do the same thing. We can't look at everyone as the same. Each person's different, and therefore the more information we get from family members of the community, the better pleas we can give to make certain they don't come back into the system.
Goody. Thank you. Susie Nelson.
I believe that treatment should be the focus instead of jail. We have counseling, and I'm sure they're overburdened with cases. In the Navajo way, we have traditional ceremonies and that we can help with our young, and I believe that really helps our young people. But for the people that are passing through our courts, they're mostly just coming from out of town, and it's kind of hard to focus because we do order counseling, but the person lives in Ohio or not in Kayenta. And that's kind of hard to do when people are just passing through. We have to work with them telephonically. We have to talk to the counselors through the phone, or we write letters, and we do the best we can, and because most of our defendants are just traveling through. Thank you.
Thank you. Evelyn Mares.
All right, well, I agree that jail is not the answer. And as taxpayers, we pay a lot of money to incarcerate defendants. So I'm always trying to look for a better way to impart justice besides jail. My vision is to collaborate with other agencies and particularly the Navajo Nation, because I do agree with Mr. Salabai that there is a high percentage of Navajo people in Precinct 1, not 80%, I think it's closer to 60%, but there is no inpatient treatment on the Navajo Nation, and there's very few resources in Holbrook. So my vision is to collaborate with the Navajo Nation to get some more resources and inpatient treatment, especially for alcoholism.
Thank you. Robert Salabai?
The criminal activities are just the byproduct of our social problem that is existing on the reservation, which is bootlegging and alcoholism. And those outlets that deals with alcohol are the contributing factors to some of these causes. And we need to not only educate our people about the effects of alcohol, but also educate the rest of the community about what they're contributing to, so that there is a balance in trying to reduce criminality and alcoholism and jail time. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to have one more question. And this would go to first Susie Nelson. Okay. Many of you have experienced different roles in the criminal justice system: clerk, translator, defense attorney, prosecutor. If elected, you will be limited to the role of judge. How can you achieve justice as a justice of the peace? Susie.
Our job is to hear cases, and in Kayenta, our caseload is not very high. When we first started, we used to have a big caseload, and now it seems like it's just dwindling down. And there's a lot of crime going on in the precinct, but most of them are committed by the natives or people that live there. Of course, those cases go to the Navajo Nation courts. And the cases that we get are non-Indian. And like I said, most of them are just passing through our jurisdiction. And we just have to do the best we can with the other states, with the other states from our counselors from other states, to make sure they get counseling and to complete whatever is ordered from the court. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you to repeat the question, please.
Many of you have experienced roles in the criminal justice system as a clerk, a translator, a prosecutor, a defense attorney. But if elected, you will be limited to your role as judge. How can you achieve justice as a justice of the peace?
Well, I've had a little bit of practice with that because I did have 30 years with Navajo County in various areas. And I can tell you that when I first went on the bench, because I came from the prosecutor's office, a lot of defense attorneys thought that I was going to be pro-prosecution. But I think I've proved that I'm able to view both sides fairly. I was a JA and I worked with quite a few Superior Court judges, so I had a lot of experience with that, and I think I've done a good job with that in my 3+ years, so that's actually one of the things I'm proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question to Robert Salabai.
The limited role of justice of the peace is going to be my primary duties, and I like to administer justice by concentrating on that job and that position and keeping the Precinct 1 as up to date as possible with criminal justice, or incorporating the latest technology, or even making the court more accessible to the community by going out to the community and making the court more accessible to the people out at the rural areas, instead of making it difficult for them to come to the courts. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Ray Reardon.
Yes, the number one thing is making certain that the Arizona and the U.S. constitutions are followed. Obviously, you can't have justice unless those are your primary goal. The other thing, too, is that I want to make certain that initial appearances where probable cause has to be found, at least for criminal cases, I'm going to make certain that it's there before the case proceeds. If not, the case is going to be dismissed right at the beginning. The JP also sets the bail amount. I'll make certain that the bail is appropriate. I've seen cases where someone's had 1,000 pounds of marijuana and given a $1,000 bail, and I've seen someone who's come in on a Prop 200 case for drugs and gets a $5,000 bail amount when they couldn't even get jail anyways. Lastly, the thing is I'm running because I want to make certain that we have a JP that will try to fix the problem instead of reacting to the problem. And so if you give me 4 years, if I can't make a difference in those 4 years about trying to get people help, that's why I'm working with the faith-based communities, is I don't trust the government as much, then I failed. And so to me, justice is making certain that someone doesn't come back.
Thank you. We have concluded our question and answer portion. These questions don't have right and wrong answers at all, but they may reveal how a candidate thinks or approaches problems. We certainly hope that they were helpful to you. We will now begin our closing statements, and our first closing statement will be Evelyn Mares.
All right. Well, first I'd like to say that I am humbled and overwhelmed with the warm welcome and the support that I have received from all of the citizens in Precinct 1. It is a big precinct, and I do spend a lot of time on the reservation. I know that there's a transportation issue, and a lot of times they're not able to come to court. So I've implemented a procedure where I go to court once a month on the reservation to help with that problem. I also, there's a lot of people that get warrants for their arrest, and so I've made it a priority to have open court so that people can address those issues. And in closing, I would just like to say that I intend to continue to impart justice fairly and treat everyone with respect that comes to my court, look at every case individually, and I believe that I have done that, and I appreciate your vote and your support on Tuesday, August 26th. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Salabai.
Ya nda agi ade ngai tisia kidon na ho kosho hol ne duj bi thodo inda ngai to hat le to be ke pa o ke do jet tho benanas anas tho inda ayo neli banan hosh khati de edat yo nel na ti na de mogo ad na ti stranago yo khasho ni sha dat yo nel na be khob za to na be khob ol hinni don di ya ho khodo ni ke ina ba hunsen to ado ni ke khazange es khoba hunsen eben na den nella na khas ta na khan wi a best shin so ben yendi shur khodo e ke hun so ni ke ha si do she das ni do sha dat yo.
Thank you. Ray Reardon.
Yes, I would like to thank you for this debate. I would like to thank the people of Precinct 2. I've had a great time the last couple of months going out and talking to people about the problems and what they'd like to see happen or change with the court. There's more things going on than even I thought before I decided to run. I love Winslow. I love the surrounding area, and I want to use my expertise not only as a defense attorney, but as a prosecutor, but as a former biologist and chemist, and then later on as a social scientist, to try to use that experience to solve problems. Like I stated earlier, the government wasn't where I focused most of my attention on. It was common people, and it was the churches, because I think that the lack of counseling was a big problem, and the churches can supply those. Now, I can't force someone to go to church, but I think it's that if someone's treatment they can go through there and it's effective to them, we'll get less and more recidivism. We'll get less and less people coming back. We need to change things up and how things are done. Thank you.
Thank you. Susie Nelson.
I'd like to thank you for inviting us here. I drove almost 6 hours coming here. I hope I'm able to reach some of my voters in the Canton area and the surrounding precincts. I travel to a lot of the chapter houses, and most of the voters are Navajo people, and our defendants that come to the court are non-Indian. I don't see any of them there. And one of the biggest concern that is brought to us is the availability of the courts to our people. And one thing that I think we could do is, if they're cited in Holbrook or Winslow, or we can probably do the initial appearance or the arraignment to the pretrial from Kayenta instead of them traveling all the way out to the other precincts. Maybe we can start in Navajo County, and then we can try the rest of the state. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it. On behalf of the Navajo County Bar Association, thank you to the candidates who participated. We thank the city of Show Low for allowing us to use these fine facilities. We are very grateful to City 4 Television for broadcasting this. We thank Carolyn Sellers for excellent timekeeping services. And we thank you, the viewer, for all of you to watch this. Please look forward for our next candidate forum, where we will feature the final candidates for the contested offices in the November elections. Meanwhile, please be sure to vote in the primary election on August 26th. Thank you.